Okay, good afternoon. For those of you who are just joining us, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a lot of information today. So again, as noted, you will be receiving a copy of the slides and a link to the recording. So first, I'd like to give you a little bit of information about SCORE. We are the largest network of free volunteer small business mentors in the country, and we are able to help you with your business no matter what stage you are in, whether you're startup, growing, or even if you're at the point where you're thinking about retiring or selling your business. It's pretty easy to request a mentor, and we, again, can help you with any part of your business. Our mission is to foster vibrant small business communities. We do this both through education and through one-on-one mentoring. Our hope is that we give you, as a small business mentor, the things that you need to thrive and to grow your business. We do know that small businesses drive not only the national economy, but the local economy. So if you're in Cleveland or any of the cities in Ohio, you can see that the downtown areas are being revitalized through small businesses. So you as a small business owner are critical to keeping our economy going. We have over 10,000 volunteers across the country. If we can't help you from the local chapter, we have the opportunity to select someone anywhere across the country who has the skills to help you with your business. This is a snapshot of our website. If you go there and you look under local mentors, you have the option of browsing all the local mentors and picking one that you feel is appropriate for you and your business, or you can allow us to match you up with someone who we think can help you. If you go to the workshops, you can see all the upcoming workshops. We hope by January to have all of our recorded workshops back on our website. So you'll be able to go there and review any of the sessions that you've been to or any that you may want to have attended but weren't able, so you can view them at your leisure. Because we get funding through the SBA and from a number of sponsors, we're able to continue to provide free webinars and free mentoring. However, you may have heard that our central office has lost funding, and so we are asking if you find some value in the program, consider going to our website and donating a small contribution. So today's webinar is funding your nonprofit business. And my colleague, Bob Fedor, is going to be here to help answer your questions. So please put them in the chat or in the Q&A. So we're going to talk about developing a fundraising plan. I'm going to provide you some statistics that you can use in your fundraising plan, where you might be looking for funding opportunities, how to identify those that will be worthwhile for you to fill out, and then some things to consider about individual donations. So you need to know, what do you need money for? So many nonprofits that I deal with haven't really sat down and identified all of the things that they need to spend money on. So, and think about not just next week or next month, but think about long term. What's your long-term plan for your program? And what are the costs you're going to need to get there? So identify your programs, look at what staffing will be available. Uh, Again, when you start out, generally you have yourself and maybe your board members doing a lot of the work, but ultimately you want to hire staffing to do those types of functions. Um, and then you have operating expenses, computers, software, so forth. So you want to have a really good plan detailing what you need in order to go out and raise funds. So you should have your board and your staff involved as well. Um, they should be aware of what your requirements are. They should be your ambassadors. So approximately 50% of the time and effort of one person should go to fundraising. So the biggest need you're going to have when you're starting out is, how am I going to pay for this? You need money. So some of the sources of funds, about half of the nonprofit income across the country is from service fees and sales of goods. About 25% comes from government contracts for services, and charitable giving accounts for only about 25%. However, most small nonprofits fall into the charitable giving, which is significant. In 2024, the total charitable giving was $499 billion. And 319 billion, or 64% of it, is from individuals. So keep that in mind. That's a critical thing. Foundations provide about 21%, corporations about 6%, and behests are at 46 billion, or close to 10%. So the thing is, when you're planning your funding plan, you should consider many different sources, diversify, think about corporations, think about foundations, but especially think about individuals. Now, where do the funds go generally? The majority of charitable dollars went to these education, health, education, human services, etc. So the majority of government funding goes to healthcare and education. So if you're not in those two categories, thinking about government funding is something that you probably don't want to bother with. Some of the examples of fee-for-service are hospitals, although many of them are converting now to being for-profit. Most hospitals are still nonprofit, but they bill patients. Museums have admission fees. Theaters that are nonprofit will sell tickets. And of course, civic organizations, which many of you probably belong to, charge dues to cover their costs. And of course, colleges require tuition, which seems to grow more and more. An example of sales would be Girl Scout cookies. That's a billion-dollar business. And again, it goes to, here's the distribution. The cost of goods is only about 30%. The rest of it goes to programs, membership services, and member support. Sales and event examples, if you look at WVIZ, for example, has an annual auction where they raise the bulk of the money that they spend during the year. Many of the nonprofits have balls or dinners um, where they maybe charge you $75, but their costs are $40. So they have a significant donation from that ticket sale. Uh, a lot of the small nonprofits start out with a 5K or a 10K run or walk because the cost of doing that is relatively low. Uh, and most of what they make on it is going to be profit. But before you decide to do some type of event, make sure you do a cost benefit analysis because keep in mind it depends on how many people participate. What sort of presence do you have on social media? How many people are following you? What sort of numbers can you think about participating? Um, you might buy a t-shirt that costs you $10, and you can charge maybe $25 or $30 to each participant. So, but if you only have 10 people who participate, it's not going to be a very cost-effective event. So make sure you've built a pretty good network before you start doing events. The Pareto principle is approximately 20% of your donors are going to provide about 80% of their income. So you want to think about identifying your highest donors. Go back and look at who's been donating and how can you move them to the next level. And most of it will require some personal interaction. So you want to spend your personal time working on those people you feel that you can encourage to increase their income. So focus on your donors. What are they looking for? Most people who donate have a vested interest in certain causes that they will donate to. And you want to identify those who seem to be focused in your direction on, on your mission and identify them and groom them to increase their donations. This is just an idea that might be helpful to you on different types of age groups, the millennials, the Gen X, and the baby boomers. Um, they all seem to respond to online and enjoy getting requests online as opposed to in the mail. They will give generally cash. Um, some will do bank or wire transfers. Um, but the important thing is what inspires them to give. Again, if you look at social media, obviously that's a pretty effective way to generate interest in your cause. Email, not quite so much, although with the baby boomers, us older people, tend to be more responsive to emails, again, because we tend to not be as much of a presence on social media. Uh, Many people will donate through the website. A few will donate by direct mail. And again, baby boomers seem to be the exception to the rule for most younger people. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about who will my business appeal to. If you're thinking about if you have something that deals with children, often older people are much more focused on like grandchildren, really wanting to help the younger people. Um, so, but think about the strategy for each of these different age groups, because the message should probably be a little bit different to somebody who's a baby boomer via somebody who's in the age where they don't have children yet, but the Gen X donors maybe already have children. So your message can vary by age group. And, think about the psychology of the people that you want to donate. So 50% of donors are enrolled in a recurring giving program. So that means if you engage somebody that you can probably keep them, that they will continue to donate given the right feedback, given the right encouragement. So only about 9% participate in workplace giving programs. So again, it's never a bad time to ask. Don't feel, well, there's inflation, people are spending so much on food and other things, but they are still responding to businesses and causes that appeal to them. So make sure that you put your plan together and go ahead and get out there and beat the bushes. Again, know who you're asking for money from. You want the age, the income status. Inflation is not the same for all. You want to look at who's going to be able to support your cause. You can use the Census Bureau and so forth to find communities that are affluent and likely to support your cause. So a donations page, if you don't have a website, make sure that you get one, that you develop one. It's really critical these days. So online revenue is increasing over 20% each year. And again, around 50% or 57 are repeat donors. So once they give and they get the appropriate positive feedback, they will continue to donate. So that's really critical. So what's the perfect donation page? How does your online donation page have features that engage donors? And that's really what you want to do. How can I engage people? So you want to keep it concise. Your website should be very clear. What is your mission? Um, you want to make sure that your branding is consistent. You should have your social media, any of your um, business cards, any kind of brochures. They should all look the same. The colors should be the same. The logo should be on all of your information. Um, Also, it's absolutely critical to tell your donors how the money is going to be used. So think about what, even if your money is going to operational support, it's still supporting your program. So clarify how your money is going to be used. For instance, I have a client who collects um, school supplies, excuse me, for elementary schools. And she will say, if you donate $10, this will supply pencils, pens, um, and so forth. But if you donate $25, that will include a backpack. So maybe that will encourage people to donate that extra amount to make sure that the kids have a backpack. So label everything on your website so it's, again, very clear. You want to optimize it for mobile, because so most people are going to be using their phones. And the most important thing is thank donors immediately. When they donate, they should get an email immediately saying, or a text saying, thank you so much for your donation towards supporting school supplies for kids, whatever. Um, Let them know again, thank you for supporting this cause. So again, we said, test it with different platforms. Make sure your website is secure if you're collecting data. And don't force a donor to create an account up front. That discourages them from donating. It's just something about thinking that you're capturing their information first doesn't work well. Get them to donate and then collect the data afterwards. Once they've donated, then they will be happy to give you their information because they want feedback on their donation. Some of the problems you run into if your process is slow, it's hard. And one thing you don't want to do is post videos directly on your website. Put them on your YouTube channel and link them to your website so it doesn't slow down the process. If it's too complicated, do a separate donation page. So if they want to donate, they click on it and immediately the form comes up and the options and so forth are available. Make sure you put a donate button on every page that links into that donate page. So if your process, do check your website at least once a week, making sure all the links are still working. Because if they're not working, again, that discourages people from doing anything on your website. So for individual giving, if you are asking people for money, you have to have an up-to-date budget to show people what you're going, again, what are you using the money for? How much money do you need? So consistently re-examine your case. Even though the pandemic occurred several years ago, many organizations changed their process or their program in order to accommodate. So if you are still, you might want to revise back to your original processes. But you want to make donor recruitment a high priority. Again, as we mentioned before, a half-time person is definitely a minimum. You should prepare your statement of need, which is kind of a mini business plan, but it gives you the opportunity to show your donors what they're supporting. So you want your mission and your vision. I suggest you might want to use AI, write your mission and then put it in AI and say, make it more compelling to donors. Again, write it from the donor perspective. What are they going to receive as a result of their donation. You know, if you donate, you will be supporting this organization for this reason. You will be supporting homeless people. You will be supporting teenage pregnancies. You will be supporting whatever, but make sure they know what they're supporting. You will have, you will realize the value of what they're doing if you can make it clear. Um, so again, you need to be proactive about telling them why they need funding, what outcomes are you going to expect if they give you money. So what's in your case statement? Again, you want to engage people's emotion. That more than anything is what influences them to donate. So when you talk about your mission and vision, make sure you're clear about why you're different from other organizations. Give them some background of your organization. Why did you start the organization? You know, did you see a need, or, you know, did it come as a bolt from the blue? How did you decide to start this organization? And what are your plans for growth? Explain the programs. What is it we do and why do we do it? And what is going to be the impact? And this is, again, this is really critical, is being able to articulate what's the impact of our program? What difference are we making? If you can't do that, it's going to be hard to encourage people to donate because they want to know what they're giving you is going to make a difference. So then clearly tell them what they can do, what types of support. You know, you might be looking for donations in kind as opposed to direct cash. Um, what can they do to help? Again, what difference will your gift make? So if you give $25, that will buy a backpack. You can use crowdfunding, and there are some sites, and I'll show you, that are specific for nonprofits. So crowdfunding is particularly good if you have a very specific project. Um, in other words, a limited goal. Um, so maybe you want to buy a particular piece of equipment that will help you provide service to your clients in a better way. So tell them how you're going to use that. What will it mean if they support that? Use videos, you know, graphics always help. Um, and again, if you're going to do crowdfunding, it's good if you have a network that is considerable size, or that your specific need is something that's very emotionally catching. Um, because otherwise you won't have enough donations. Um, You want to email your database, you want to text them, you want to share all the information on all of your social media platforms. Um, when you get the donations, again, you want to be able to thank them, and then ultimately you can withdraw the funds. And here are a list of the top sites for nonprofit crowdfunding. And most of them are free until you get a donation, and they take a small percentage of the fee from every donation. So you're not spending money up front that you may not benefit from. And that's the advantage of these nonprofit crowdfunding sites. So another thing you want to think about is legacy gifts, that people who donate might put you in their will, um, and should be encouraging them to think about in your organization as part of their estate planning. And again, once you've been working with a particular client that has been increasingly giving you funds, it's time to think about talking to them about their will or their estate. And also, you want to be able to track your donors. Again, if you track them, you keep in touch with them. And again, it makes it easier to encourage them to increase their giving. So you want a client relational management software. Here are some, a lot of them are free up to a certain number. Um, and but go and look at the various ones that are available. Again, you can Google, and then have them do a demo of how they manage the software so you know if it's going to fit your organization or not. So Salesforce is one that SCORE uses and many large nonprofits use. It's a little bit difficult to use, and probably more sophisticated than most small nonprofits use. So I would definitely look at some of the other ones. But before you do, make a list of all the things you want your software to do. Do you want it to track what information do you want on your donors? Um, what information do you want on your granting organizations? They should be all part of the same CRM software. So now let's talk somewhat about where you can get some grants. And keep in mind, again, if you're a new nonprofit just starting out, that it's really hard to compete for funds because there's so many organizations that have been in business, that have a good track record, that you are going to compete with. So you're much better off looking at corporate giving programs, some private foundations, and so forth. But we're going to talk about all of those. First of all, think about matching gift programs. If you have employees or volunteers that work with you, many of them work for organizations that have a matching program. And that's a great way to get some donations. And here are some statistics that I think are very eye-opening. Billions of dollars in matching funds are not claimed. And up to 65% of the Fortune 500 companies offer matching gifts. And over 18 million individuals work for companies that have a matching program. So only 2 to 3 billion is donated through matching gift programs. So you can see there's a big discrepancy between what's available and what's actually being claimed. So make sure that you ask donors if they are part of a matching gift program. And 84% of donors say they're more likely to donate if their company has a match. So here's a list of companies that do have matching programs. Again, these are major companies, but many of them have local chapters or local branches that you might be able to contact. Um, you can look at their websites. Um, but again, ask your clients, your employees, do they have matching uh, programs? So grant giving private foundations, a lot of private foundations are set up specifically to provide grants for a certain population. Um, and we're talking like the Susan Komen Foundation for Breast Cancer, the Leukemia Foundation. So there are a lot of disease-associated private foundations. Um, they make grants, uh, and at least a third of their support comes from small donors. So you see um, the Cleveland Foundation, for instance, takes donations from many different organizations and turns them around and turns them into grants. So if you're a small, say you're a small organization and you want to participate, you can donate your funds to the Cleveland Foundation and know that they're being used to support worthy causes. Uh, So if you're going to go to a grant giving private foundation, a lot of times you might need to talk to their program director. So look at their website and find out. Others will ask for a cover letter. Um, and they will tell you whether or not, based on their assessment, if you can apply. So it's not automatic that you can apply for something. But in order to apply, you need a business plan. And that statement of need that we referred to uh, in some of the other slides is sort of a mini business plan, and it actually is most adequate for a lot of the small grant giving foundations. So it definitely has a good description of your mission um, and the need that your nonprofit is going to address. You want to include your budgets and your financial needs. Again, most of them are online applications. So here are the top private ones. Again, this is a small font and maybe hard to read, but put together primarily for when you have an opportunity to get the slides that you can go through it and pick out the ones that you think might be worthwhile for you. But you can see there's a huge amount of money. So federal nonprofit grant programs are pretty slim. You can search grants.gov and put in a keyword, and you might want to do something like childcare or group homes, homeless veterans, and it will bring up a list of all the announcements that relate to that topic. And grants.gov covers all of the grants for 26 federal agencies. Again, if you're just starting out, you probably need to be in business for at least 3 years and have some data that shows that you're being productive or being successful, that you have good outcomes. otherwise, again, the competition is so intense that it's almost impossible to get a federal grant. There are other programs you might want to consider if you're in the arts, the National Endowment for the Arts, humanities. Check your state or city government website. Sometimes they have programs that are limited. What happens is the federal government gives the state a bolus of money, which is then divided usually to the cities and even the counties. So they will have a program that is limited because the amount of money they have. So check the website. They will post what's available and what the requirements are. But when they run out of money, it's gone. So you want to check maybe once a month to see if there are any ongoing, a lot of times they're considered pilot programs, but grab them if they're applicable to your particular uh, business. And the states often have national or have um, endowments for the arts or humanities. Um, but probably the one thing that is the easiest to access that will give you the most in-depth information is candid.org, which is a huge database of all the grant giving foundations in the country. So you can look at, particularly at the local or regional ones that you're interested in. Now, Candid is a great resource, but it is expensive if you go directly through their website. But many of the local libraries will give you free access. So check with your local library. The reference librarian can show you how to use it. If you attended our webinar last week with David Holmes, who's the educational director for this region for Candid. He did show how the database can be used. But the nice thing is, last week, it just came out that Claude AI, which has a free version, can access the information from Candid. So if you go to Claude AI and put in a prompt about your business, what your mission is, what your population is, and so forth, it will draw information from Candid. So I recommend highly trying that, and then, or if your local library does not have free access to Candid. Here are some other opportunities. The Small Business Association has a section on grants. It usually will just refer you to the national website. If you're in Cleveland, this will get you to the Cleveland website. If you're in a different city, I suggest you just go to the city website under business resources and see if there's anything available. And also, and I think this is probably true of every city in Ohio, that there are grants, loans, and tax incentives that are specifically, specific to Ohio. If you go and look under business, there are a lot of different options. There are some grants, but mostly they have low interest rate loans. They have some specific tax incentives for businesses. They have specific support for minority businesses. So all of those are things that you should look at to see if they would support the business that you're trying to grow. Um, Now, I do a lot of nonprofit mentoring, as Bob does, and I would say probably 75% of the clients I have are women. So I specifically wanted to provide some information for women. Um, There Federal Department of Health grants, the National Science Foundation, um, and these are active links. You'll be able to go through them. Again, some of them are very small. They might be $1,000 or $2,000, but maybe that's all you need to get started. So it's really worth looking at them to see if they are um, companies that would support what you're trying to do. So let's talk about a few bonus tips. Um, if you're relatively new, it's always helpful to find a nonprofit that's similar to yours, not necessarily in the same area. So if you're in Cleveland, you might want to contact somebody in Columbus or Cincinnati and vice versa. But you can reach out and introduce yourself, ask about how they got started, what kind of problems maybe they ran into that they weren't expecting. Um, just issues that they might think would be helpful to you. Um, My experience is that many business owners are happy to talk about how they got started. Again, what are the problems they ran into, maybe how they solved them. That, I think, is a great strategy for um, finding out things that you maybe should look out for when you're doing your own business. So you don't need to wait until you're completely approved to get started. Many times when you apply for a 501c3, it takes a while. It used to be that they're required to respond within 60 days. I don't think they're doing that anymore. Certainly, the pandemic slowed everything down and it hasn't gotten back to its former level. However, the policy is that if you are approved, it's retroactive to the day that you submitted your application. So a caveat there is to make sure that your application is complete, that you have provided all the information that they've requested, because if you don't, they will come back and ask you for it, and that's going to delay the response. So work with your SCORE mentor to assure that you have everything you need for the IRS application before you go online to file it. You might want to practice your grant writing skills. Um, Again, most of the applications are now online and they want your budget. A lot of the information they want is very straightforward, but when you're writing about your mission, your vision, background, you might want to use some of the AI tools to polish it up a little bit. Uh, again, if you attended the webinar last week, you know, Candid has grant writing classes. Most of them are free. And they have a lot of other nonprofit information that will be helpful to you. So along with having a SCORE mentor, you might want to take advantage of some of the classes that Candid has. Again, if you found that there's some value in our program today, we would love it if you would consider uh, donating a small amount to SCORE, uh, which is a nonprofit. Um, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have. Okay. Bob, you're muted.
You're correct.
There to go. Are
There's
you?
two questions on donor tracking software. How do you feel about Zephy or DonorBox? I personally do not have any experience.
Yeah. And again, I would just say you've got to identify what exactly do I want my software to do? What functions does it need to have? What data do I want to collect? And then go and look at the various software options. Ask them to do a a demo, because most of them will, to make sure that they encompass everything that you want to include. Uh, what you don't want to do is choose a free one to start, and then when you get to, say, 250 records, you have to start paying for it, and you decide it's too expensive, and you want to go to another one, and you have to start all over. So you want to look at something with the idea that this is a long-term software package that is going to be useful for the life of my nonprofit. So can you raise money for an LLC? Well, if the LLC is a nonprofit, yes. If it's a for-profit, again, there are some companies that supply grants for-profit companies. For instance, FedEx. If you have a family member that works for FedEx, they might provide some funding. Um, Again, I would use the AI tools to search for organizations that provide funding for-profit organizations. Now, there are some federal grants for-profits. They're called the SBIR grants. They're Small Business Innovative Research. They're very specific, and you can go check on the federal website about them. Um,
They're basically for technology development.
Yes, but they've changed their focus a little bit recently to do a little more. But ideally, I know that when I was working with the research group, we had SBIR grants for some software development.
Mhm.
Um, so that's something you can look at. Also, again, the grants for women, many of those also will support for-profit businesses. So if you look at those lists, I mean, there are dozens of small business grants. They will support both nonprofits and for-profits.
Okay, there's a question on, do you have any specific guidance for nonprofit professional association and fundraising beyond membership dues?
Um, Well, again, I would suggest probably doing events. Um, that's always a way. If you have a professional association, that means that you have the membership. You could do luncheons, you can do networking events, you could do
Golf outing.
golf outings. If you have or know of people who are entertainment sources, and you can bring them in and do an event. Um, I think those are probably one of the easiest ways to raise money. Again, you can do a 5 or 10K run. You can do a ball, a dinner dance of some sort. But I would think an event would probably be one of the easier ways to raise funds. Unlikely to get grants for that kind of thing. So
I
is
do
that
not,
it?
I do not see any others.
Okay, super. Um, so I hope this has been helpful to you. Again, if you are feeling affluent and like to donate a few bucks to SCORE, we would certainly appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you at our next nonprofit session, which will be on building capacity, I believe. I'm not sure exactly when it will be. Um, but I hope that you will enjoy the rest of your day and that this will give you a little bit of information that will be helpful. And thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
And